Hey everyone, Tactics here with my second tank preview on the War Within beta here, where in this video I'm going to be going over Guardian Druid, showing off both of their hero talent trees, kind of walking you through what they give you and show you what they do and how they affect your talents and your actual gameplay, and also just giving some feedback on both of those, as well as the talent tree changes, things like that, to hopefully be improved upon before launch. Of course, we've got Mythic Plus testing coming up this weekend very soon, and I'll be live streaming a ton of that to get more testing in on a bunch of the different tank specs, so make sure you do stop by and see that. I will be also posting an updated kind of revisit to all the tank specs closer to launch to see what has changed between these videos, and give my thoughts on them in season 1. So make sure you're subscribed to the channel so you know when those get posted. Otherwise, let's start out here with the general tree, which, if you'll notice, it has seen quite a few changes actually going into the beta here. Unfortunately, not all those changes are positive. So the one big thing here, your dispel is much more accessible. It's only 2-point investment now from your base tree, basically, instead of a 1-point investment. But it also, they've fixed the pathing kind of down this tree, so you now can basically essentially always get your dispel. That's really, you kind of need it to actually path down the middle, or the right side of the tree rather. The fastest way to get down there really is through your dispel, so you kind of always have your dispel now, at least as a Guardian Druid, which is kind of nice in Mythic Plus. There are some downsides though. So long arms, Astral Influence here, this kind of talent, this type of talent is, I guess, philosophically, sorry, has been taken away from every melee spec that has it, basically, in the War Within beta, and that includes, of course, Feral and Guardian Druid. So now this is specific to spells, not your abilities. So your Moonfire, for example, will still benefit from this, but none of your other spells like Mangle, like Thrash will. So really, you're going to basically avoid it now. It's no longer a point you're interested in. Another philosophical change has been on AoE, like root and fear effects. So Mass Entangle has had its duration slashed all the way down to 10 seconds here. So pretty significant nerf. It's not the only root that was nerfed this way. A bunch of them have been. So I guess they don't really want you to be able to perma root mobs, basically, which, was something that was a common strategy in a few dungeons like No-Kud, or like the Morchi fight in the Mega Dungeon, right? So getting rid of that strategy. The other thing as well, in the capstone area, there are a few new talents. So you have these new 2-point blockers, where on the left side it increases Shred, Swipe, Break, Mangle, and Thrash damage by 5% per point. And on the right side, it's Moonfire and Sunfire damage by 5% per point rather, and then Rejuve and Wild Growth healing by 2.5 points, or percents per point. So some very basic 2-point blockers here that are kind of weird. I don't really like that they're there, especially because, they gate things that other specs would want. And for example, if you're a Boomkin or a Resto Druid kind of pathing on this, like, yeah, Resto Druid might rake sometimes, and might shred sometimes, but not a ton. And if you want to get your AoE stop and in-cap roar, it's now gated behind this 2-point node, which I think is a bit odd for sure. Same deal over here. There's this really cool new talent called Fluid Form, which is most likely, if you're going to see the use case, it's probably Resto Druids and Guardian Druids in Druid of the Claw for Guardian when I get into that. But basically, it lets you save a global by auto-shifting when you press certain abilities. And the problem is, Druid of the Claw is very point constrained in the general tree, as you'll see when I cover that. And having to put 2 points in Moonfire damage increase to get Fluid Form, which is for sure mandatory basically for Druid of the Claw, feels pretty bad. And so having this be on the right side is a bit odd. I think this should probably be in the middle. Forest Walk is a perfectly fine thing to swap it for, because this is a resto focused ability, and this is a ability that technically is targeted at several different Druid specs. Makes sense for this to be in the middle, in my opinion, and that would save Druid of the Claw some much needed talent points as well. Looking at the rest of the tree, there's still some weird decisions, like Stampeding Roar is gated behind either taking a couple CCs or a CC and a Soothe. I really dislike this. This doesn't make any sense. Stampeding Roar is like a staple ability that you want to spec into 100% of the time, right? You always want this ability. Meanwhile, these are all niche abilities. Like, yeah, you probably want Ursul's Mythic Plus, but Soothe is something that's extremely niche, either by the dungeon or specifically Raging Week, if that's going to still even be an affix. We'll have to wait and see until launch. Cyclone, maybe it's a PvP thing, but you will literally never use this spell in PvE. I don't think there was a single use case for it in all of Dragonflight. It's so exceptionally niche I don't know why this isn't just baseline. Why is it even taking up a talent point, right? That's kind of my thought. Similarly, Ursoc Spirit here, flat 10% stamina in bear form. You know what they did? All they did was take away 10% of the stamina you actually get in bear form from the bear form ability, and they put it in your talent tree. Like, why is this a talent? Especially because for like Boomkins, Wrestle Druids, Ferals that are bear shifting for defensiveness, they can take Ursine Vigor, right? This talent's right here. They can take that instead. This doesn't even need to exist here. This can go back to being passive for bear form or for Guardian specifically, and just, you know, put something else there, right? Fix the pathing in this tree, because it's still pretty awkward to kind of path through this tree. And potentially a large reason for that is, again, you have to kind of spend a lot of points near the top on things that you maybe don't necessarily need, right? Like we're grabbing Rejuve, and now we have nothing. Like our options are basically we take Wild Growth to path down the tree further, or we take Remove Corruption to path down the tree further, right? And so in cases where you don't need these, you're taking one anyways, and that's 2 dead points that you're just taking so you can actually path down things you want. Similarly, Druid of the Claw, you need Rake and Rip, but they don't actually open up any pathing for you. So you have to add 2 points to this area because you still need to path down this way, right? And so that just further restricts you. And I don't know. These, I think you need to seriously consider making some of these baseline, or rolling Rake and Rip into like a single talent point instead of spending 2 talent points, and just how you actually path through the tree, especially at the start, from the start, as a spec that maybe you want, like a Druid of the Claw, like I'm saying, wants to be a part of Rake and Rip. You know, in Mythic Plus, you want to have your Dispel in a lot of the time, right? So it's just something is not working here, and I understand the difficulties of trying to fit 4 specs into a talent tree, but I think you need to do something different than having these kind of blockers here. Like, why are Resto Druids gated behind like taking like Iron Fur and like Fizz Dam and armor increase, right, to get to their kick? And on the topic of the kick, I think it would be kind of interesting too if potentially like or Solar Beam rather was moved to the general tree. I know Boomkins, you know, it's not super hard to get anymore, but initially in season 1, I believe it was like kind of rough to actually get to it, and you know, a spec tree point, which is kind of rough. And so what if it became a choice node with Skull Bash, and then that way you could move it closer to the center of the tree, because technically, you know, it would affect all Druid specs, and then you had the choice, and it'd be more accessible. Like, do you want a melee kick? Do you want AoE silence? Especially now that they're giving tanks in general, it seems like a bit more AoE control, as we've seen, to try and, you know, be a little bit closer to Vengeance. Again, we'll see if Vengeance gets nerfed, but it'd be cool if that was available. And it's not like you would have both, right? They'd be a choice node, so you can actually pick if you wanted the individual melee kick or the AoE one. Something to think about. For Guardian specifically, I think these two blocking this capstone area is kind of weird, because Ursine Vigor and Madadfur are both pretty weak for Guardian specifically, especially if you're not playing, or if you're playing Elune's Chosen, because you can't shapeshift out and back into bear while you're taking something to get this defensive benefit, right? And this is just very, very bad for Guardian Druid. So again, the AoE stop probably should be one of these nodes, maybe. I don't know, just because it's pretty hard to access currently. And like I said, Stampeding Roar needs to be like up here probably, and maybe you rethink how this order is and whatnot. But Stampeding Roar needs to be front and center, easy to access. Soothe should be an offshoot, you know, similar to how Hibernate is a offshoot on its own, very easy to access for a ton of specs, right? But yeah, I think having Stampeding Roar be behind 2 points that you may actually want 0 of is kind of rough for sure. Moving to the spec tree, not much to talk about here because there's literally no changes, and that is very rough for Guardian Druid, because there's a ton of problems, and I'm just going to laundry list them here because, you know, I've been harping on them for a while, and it's just I'm still upset with the state of the spec tree. So let's go through it. Why do we need 4 to 5 points to make Berserk a actual ability here? You need these 3 nodes. Well, you don't actually need Persistence. Some people are dropping Persistence, but you need these 2 nodes, and then you need Incarnate Self and Ursoc's Guidance, which eats up an additional 2 points in your capstone area. These 3 nodes at minimum should be a single node. If you did that, this would still be a 15-second duration, 3-minute CD that is not very powerful on its own. It's not OP to make these 3 points 1 node, and that would free up 2 spots in the tree, or potentially just 2 talent points for Guardian Druids, which would be amazing. Something we're going to talk about in a second here is Elune's Chosen runs on a Lunar Beam, and I talked about this for Templars and Paladins, but running on a capstone talent and being required to have a capstone talent to function is rough. It kind of feels bad. And look at Lunar Beam, literally the furthest bottom right talent you can get. If These berserks were all 1 point up here. You could move Lunar Beam to a much more accessible position, and it would be not as restrictive on your capstone, excuse me, your capstone talent points. 2-point nodes, or another problem, if you look at some of the talent trees that have been redone either at the end of Dragonflight or through Alpha and Beta, what you see kind of across the board is the removal of 2-point nodes. Guardian Druid still has 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 2-point nodes. These need to be heavily reduced. A lot of these, I don't even know why they're 2-point nodes, right? The power-wise, they really shouldn't be. Or you could even, in some cases, reduce the power slightly and make it a 1-point node, right? I think in a lot of cases, people would be happy with that. You don't need to get rid of all of them, but getting rid of 4 to 5 of them would go a long way. And that would, again, match up with what they've been doing with the more recent spec and class trees, where they have anywhere from 0 to like 2-point nodes in the entire tree. Being on some individual talents, I think in the cap scenario, you also have Blood Frenzy and Raise. Raise is literally our only AoE spender. I have no idea why this ability is in the capstone. It should be, I think, in the tier 1 area. It makes perfect sense to put it in the tier 1 area, but no, it's in the capstone. That needs to be moved up out of the capstone for sure. And similarly, I think Blood Frenzy should not be in the capstone, right? It was nerfed. It was extremely powerful pre-nerf in Season 2 of Dragonflight, being uncapped. And 2 rage a target. It's now capped at 3 rage a target. This should probably be a tier 2 talent, in my opinion, not in tier 3. And that opens up, again, moving these out of the capstone even on its own makes this feel a whole lot less locked in, and you have a bit more flexibility in that area, which is certainly needed in the Guardian tree. Would love to see these two moved out individually too. Dream of Cenarius has some problems. So I believe there was like a classic fix or something with like shifting macros, and that kind of collateral, the Dream of Cenarius macro people were using, that prevented you from accidentally shifting out of bear form if you pressed regrowth while you didn't have a Dream of Cenarius proc. So now it's just kind of gambling. You can fat finger your regrowth and pop out of bear form, instantly die. So they need to do something, either like re-enable that macro on retail WoW so that you can still safely use it and not get murdered by accidentally pressing regrowth, or just have Dream of Cenarius also make regrowth castable in bear form. And if you really don't want people to cast it in bear form, just give it a massive rage cost or something like that, or mana cost. I don't know. Give it a cost that's super high that you don't actually want to press it, and then you'll only press it when you get the procs. But at least then, if you fat finger it, you'll see the cast time and you can cancel it before you just instantly die, because you'll still be in bear form. So would like to see that changed in some way. Finally, last thing I want to talk about is Convoke. Convoke being on a choice node with Incarn essentially just makes this a dead talent. I believe it had a 0% pick rate, one of those 0% pick rate talents. Because the other thing too is Convoke is very bad in bear form. Very bad in bear form. It's inconsistent defensively, and the only reason you ever really did ever bear Convoke back in Shadowlands, when this was an actual Covenant ability, was for the mastery buff that the Soulbind it was attached to gave. And so with it just being on its own, you kind of never want to take it as just a bear. But if you're weaving like Druid of the Claw, you potentially do actually want to take that for like cat weaving convokes and that kind of thing. However, Druid of the Claw tree also has Incarn synergy, so you need to play Incarn, and you'd like to play Convoke, but you just can't. Convoke is also an ability I'd like to see moved to the class tree potentially, because every single Druid spec has Convoke in their tree somewhere. Kind of weird that it's just kind of thrown into the class trees. Give it the Paladin treatment, throw it into the general tree for Druids, and that would make it more accessible. And I don't think it would be OP for Druids to have access to both Incarn and Convoke the Spirits. Similar weak talents here. Pulverize. I don't know why this talent has not really received any real significant buffs. It still consumes your Thrash. It's still a single target DR on a 45-second cooldown, like a very long cooldown for a single target DR that eats your Thrash stack. So something needs to change there. Maybe it just needs to be removed. Maybe it just needs to be rethought. I don't know, but it's still also going to be a 0% pick rate talent, and there's nothing really to talk about there. So something needs to change for that. So I've ranted enough, I think, about the talent tree that has received no changes. Really hoping not only Guardian but also Prot Warrior, I think, needs a light touching on their spec tree. I'm not even asking for anything terribly new or rework, though I would not argue against receiving something like the Shadowlands 2-piece with Barkskin giving you Incarn, or the Shadowlands Legendary Natural Orders Wills appearing. Wouldn't argue, but I'm not asking for anything new, just a reshuffle and the removal of 2-point nodes and making, certain things more accessible, that kind of thing. Let's look at tier. not much to talk about here. It's very, very boring and straightforward. So here it is. Thrash and Moonfire increase your damage done and reduce your damage taken by 1% for 8 seconds. Essentially perma, 3% damage done and damage taken increase. So it's, it's fine. This seems to be pretty standard. If you look at the tank sets, a lot of them are all kind of 3% DR and then some small percent of damage across the board. Then there are 4-piece here. Arcane damage and bleed damage increased by 5%. The numbers on these probably need to go a little bit up damage-wise. Defensive-wise, it seems like, all of them, again, across the board are 3% DR, basically, with, like, some very minor variants. So that seems to be their goal. Boring kind of makes sense. Again, their goal is to focus on hero talent, similar to Dragonflight Season 1. But at the same time, the Dragonflight Season 1 was infinitely more interesting. It was, the AoE Mangle heal thing. Infinitely more interesting than this. This is just so boring. I get it. You need to do both arcane damage and bleed stuff to fit both the hero talent trees, but it's still, I don't know. It's still rough, like, in terms of how boring it is, even if you're focusing on the hero trees. And also the throughput wise, but I assume that's something that can change. 5% and then 3% flat. It's not a lot of throughput, right? Like, this is historically low throughput on a tier set. So we'll see, but nothing really to talk about there. Now let's go hero talent trees. We've got Elune's Chosen first up here, your big arcane one. And as you can see here, it revolves around Lunar Beam. So as a Guardian Druid, Lunar Beam here is going to give you 10% more leech. And also at the bottom here, it's also going to give you 10% more mastery. It's going to deal some more damage and last 3 seconds longer. Note here, Lunar Beam still does absolutely baby damage. It's not very good damage-wise, so don't really focus on ever really amping Lunar Beam damage on purpose. But it lasting longer and it giving you another 10% mastery, it's giving you 30% mastery. That is a crazy amount of mastery. It's a lot of damage too because of the attack power scaling of mastery. And I think I have almost 11 million HP when I press Lunar Beam, right? Let's just go in here. What I got? I've got 8 million right now in normal gear. I press Lunar Beam, 10.5 million, and you're just going to go up, and it's 30% mastery, right? So if you look at the attack power scaling I'm getting from this, I'm at 39% mastery. You get 56% bonus attack power. Like, this is a chunky CD. And then you're also get CDR here from your arcane ability. So pressing any arcane ability, that's Moonfire. And also, that is Thrash here from Lunar Calling. It makes your Thrash arcane damage. And so pressing either Moonfire or Thrash gives you 3 seconds of CDR and Lunar Beam. And this kind of ballparks to Lunar Beam being like a 30-second CD if you are, playing kind of normally. It doesn't matter the number of targets you hit. So, like, if you come over and you hit, like, an AoE target with, like, 3 mobs, you're still only going to get the 3 seconds of CDR. You're not going to get 9 seconds of CDR. So, scaling in single target and AoE is the absolute same for that. Your automatic Galactic Guardian procs also do not proc that CDR. So, you do need to physically press Moonfire to actually get that CDR. But speaking of the Galactic Guardian procs, these are also going to be generating a ton more rage for you here because just no matter what target count you're in, single target, AoE, when Galactic Guardian procs, you get 5 rage instantly. Now, if you're in AoE, you still have the twin Moonfire interaction, where the twinned Moonfire will consume the previous Galactic Guardian proc. So if you already have a Galactic Guardian proc up, and then Galactic Guardian procs again, you will instead get 13 rage. So 5 from here and 8 from here, assuming you're in AoE, and you'll instantly get 13 rage. So nice little rage boost there to Galactic Guardian, which is nice, especially early on in the expansion. Haste levels are pretty low, just generally stats are pretty low, and so it's nice to have that rage generation. And you also have this one in Light of the Elune, where Moonfire damage has a chance to call down Fury of Elune for 3 seconds, which is going to give you 6 rage per second, and then it's going to explode at the end, and after that 3 seconds, it'll give you 6 more rage. So in total, it's going to give you 24 rage over the 3 seconds it's up, and it's also, like I said, it's going to explode now for some additional AoE damage, so nice in AoE for sure, and because it's off of Moonfire damage, I think, in theory, the proc rate is going to increase in AoE. In like a 3 target scenario, was getting it to proc about every 30-ish seconds, so like twice a minute. Unsure what the actual PPM is, but that's what I was getting in my testing, about twice per minute on 3 targets. So something that's going to happen decently often, and you get a really big burst of rage because of this. Also, at the same time, right, if you get a Fury of Elune proc, that's giving you 24 rage over the 3 seconds. You're also going to be getting maybe sometimes Galactic Guardian procs and then your own rage generation on top of that. So you get quite a bit of rage generation potentially in bursts whenever you do get a Fury of Elune proc, which does feel nice, but also some situations, especially if you're in an Incarn, when it happens, you're pretty flooded with rage and it can be tough to actually get rid of it all, which always feels a bit odd. But, you know, early in expansion, already being flooded with rage, I'm not going to complain too much because having the rage is nice, but it is a bit odd because you feel really flooded during these like 3-second windows, 4-second windows, and then outside of that you feel really starved, especially because you're so proc dependent now on your rage generation. Like if you don't get Galactic Guardian procs, you're not having rage. If you're not getting these Fury of Elune procs kind of when you need them, good luck on getting rage, right? And so especially early in the expansion, sorry. So it's a bit tough. It's really feast or famine, which is I don't know if I like, and I would like a way for maybe to spread this out a bit more, be more consistent as opposed to bursty, but I'm not sure how that would happen. Also, by the way, animations need to up their game a bit, I think, on this, because if you look right, Lunar Beam, just this little beam, pretty boring, same as before. My Thrash is arcane damage right now. It's not doing anything though. It's just a regular Thrash. It would be sick if both of those had different animations. I think like a arcane Thrash and like a cooler Lunar Beam animation. I don't know. Seems like I would love to see hero talents really dive into the animations. I know some of them do, but some of them seem lacking, and Elune's Chosen, unfortunately, is one of those lacking ones, which is a bit rough. My other main issue, let me get out of here real quick. My other main issue here is, of course, with Lunar Beam's positioning in the tree, like I mentioned. Bottom right capstone, this area is tight on point. It's super tight on points. This is a Mythic Plus build right now, but like dropping Raise in Mythic Plus, dropping Blood Frenzy in Mythic Plus, like some people have suggested it. I think that's crazy. I don't like, you need your AoE spender. You're not just going to be sitting here Iron Furring only, you know. It's yeah, and with Tooth and Claw applying AoE, right, you want to be able to do that. So having Blood Frenzy and Raise is important, and so you have to make some other choices here. Like maybe if you don't need Rage of the Sleeper, you could get Moonless Night, but you really want Twin Moonfire and AoE. In Raid, you're a little less restricted. You can drop these two in Raid, right, and you can go, hey, we can grab Moonless Light, we can get a Scintillating Moonlight. Maybe we drop Twin Moonfire if it's a pure single target. Now you can pick up all these other Moonfire things, right? But in Mythic Plus, it's tough. It's really tough to do that because of just where nodes are positioned and because Lunar Beam's all the way in the bottom right? So like I said, we'd love to see Berserk rolled in the 1 point. We'd love to see Lunar Beam put in the persistent spot, and we'd love to see Thrash and Blood Frenzy move up the tree. You can even put Raise like in the Unchecked Aggression spot, right? Move Blood Frenzy up somewhere in the tree too, right? So I think these talents, I would love to see 100% moved out of the capstone. This one, I just really don't like hero talents playing off capstone talents. So would love to see that moved. Maybe you could add Fury of Elune if you really wanted to add synergies. That's my other problem with Elune's Chosen is, you know, you can turn Thrash into an arcane damage spell. But outside of the CDR on Lunar Beam, there's really no synergies you have with arcane damage spells. And again, in the tree, literally all you have is Elune's Favored, which is also a questionable point. Like potentially too, you could do like drop this, and Elune's Favored, it's just tick healing, which you're already doing a lot of tick healing from Lunar Beam. So maybe you don't want even more tick healing. And so you don't have a ton of arcane synergy. And I would love for this tree to expand more on arcane damage, providing synergies for your kit. But you know, this is what we have currently, so that's just my thoughts on it. It's a little bit boring. It doesn't really expand a ton, and the only thing it does is it actually makes Lunar Beam a CD you probably want to use, right, if you're playing this, but that is also problematic in where it's positioned on the talent tree. So that is Elune's Chosen. Let's take a look at Druid of the Claw here. So this is where we get into a lot of problems, like I was mentioning on the general tree. You need Rake and you need Rip. And then, of course, you want to path down this side to actually get to your Fluid Form ability, which you need because I'll show you the gameplay, but you really need that. And that makes you very point starved in the whole tree because you need to add 2 more tier 1 points. And then you also don't get to go down this way because you have to invest 2 more points in Moonfire damage, which you would definitely want to avoid in order to actually even get to Fluid Form, which is kind of rough. Now, let's look at the actual tree itself here. And the big ability is Ravage, which has been buffed a few times now. It basically just replaces Maul, and it's kind of what Raise wants to be. You know what I mean? It's a big physical hit that does less damage to all other enemies in front of you, so it's uncapped. and it also has a bleed attached to it here. And the whole kind of game is you can extend this bleed by pressing Maul, Raise, Mangle, Thrash, or even Swipes. So really, any of your core rotational abilities extends it by up to 8 additional seconds. And this whole time, this is actually a 10% TR for Guardian Druid. It's not 4% like it says. Plus, it deals a pretty significant amount of damage, and because, again, Ravage is uncapped, this bleed applies to everything you hit with Ravage, so it's actually pretty cool. Big bleed synergy there. Outside of that, again, a couple boring nodes, right? You get some more Rage, which is kind of interesting. Kind of a weird bonus where Frenzied Regen increases your max health, maybe kind of encourages, like, Tank Buster is about to come out. Press Frenzied Regen the second before you're hit with that Tank Buster, so you waste a tick, but you gain that 10% max health, and you'll instantly heal yourself back up because Frenzy Regen is still running, so potentially that kind of gameplay. Some passive Stampeding Roar. Little boring. This choice node kind of sucks. You get a boring crit strike, crit chance increase. Mangle 1% heal is literally nothing. That's insignificant totally. Or 5 seconds on Pulverize, which, like we mentioned, is not a great ability. This could be 15 seconds on Pulverize, and I'm not sure you would take it. Maybe then it would be very niched to take that in raids, potentially, if this was 15 seconds on Pulverize. But as is, you're not going to take it, because you're not going to take Pulverize. And so if they really want Pulverize to be a thing, this tree would have to amp up Pulverize a fair bit. Now, the really, really cool thing that I like about this tree is this talent right here, Wild Power Surge, which in combination with Wild Shape Mastery allow you to shift into cat form while tanking things. So here, Iron Fur and Frenzy Regen persist in cat form. When you transform from bear to cat, you retain 80% of your bear form stats or your armor and health for 6 seconds, and your crit immunity as well for 6 seconds. And then alternatively, for 6 seconds after entering bear form, you heal for 10% of the damage taken over 8 seconds. So pretty nice to be shifting out and then shifting back in kind of 6-second windows, as long as you aren't at a bear for more than 6 seconds. And at the same time here, you use Mangle to gain these stacks, and once you hit 6 stacks, the next time you transform into cat, you get instantly 5 combo points, and your next spender deals 100% increased damage. So you can get these really powerful rake rip combos because of fluid form over here, which lets you auto transform on certain ability presses, right? So what you can do is I can show you, is you can build up 6 stacks of that thing, and then you can rake to instantly swap into cat form, keep your defensives, pop a rip. So I'll just pop Incarn right now. As you can see here, Maul is transforming just based on, I believe it's autos. You can see my blood there. I've got 5 stacks of this feline potential now. Here's my 6th stack, right? So I now my next transform will do it. So what I can do is Iron Fur, and I can hit my Rake Bind here, and I can instantly hit my Rip Bind, and then I can hit Mangle again, and I'm back in bear form already. So it's really, really cool in single target gameplay. I really like it. I've always been a huge fan of weaving. The other thing too is you can see here, when I get Tooth and Claw procs, if you also have a Ravage proc, is it called Ravage? Yeah, it's called Ravage. If I also have a Ravage proc, it consumes Tooth and Claw as well. So in AoE, Ravage will also still apply the Tooth and Claw DR to any mobs it hits, and in single target as well, of course. So that is a nice little thing they've thought of there. So Ravage makes use of those Tooth and Claw procs. It's not like they're just kind of a waste. So very, very interesting gameplay here between these two. The one thing I would like to see is kind of some AoE potentially where you actually have some incentive to use AoE weaving, because right now you don't. Right now it's literally just Rake or Rip. Sorry, not Rake or Rip. It's Rip or Ferocious Bite, which are both single target, and so that's cool in single target. But if you're talking about Mythic Plus, I'm sure you could survive because you maintain Iron Fur, because you maintain 80% of your defensive stats, shapeshifting in a Trash Bowl. Maybe not a Giga Trash Bowl, but there's just no reason to actually do it because you can't do an AoE thing. Maybe access to Primal Wrath would be super interesting. Maybe that would be broken though, but that would be kind of cool if you instead in AoE could run out and do a Primal Wrath and do that and just rip everything in the pack. That would be kind of sick. I'm sure you'll still make use of this if you're running Druid of the Claw and Mythic Plus, which again, not sure you will be, but if you are, and you are running Wild Power Surge, obviously it's still going to be probably good on Mythic Plus bosses, because you probably can find time to, shapeshift and use your bleed effect for a few seconds and then shapeshift back into bear, especially with fluid form. You saw how quick that was. So you'll probably do that, but still it's just tough. I'm a huge fan of the shapeshifting cat weaving fantasy. I really, really enjoyed it in Shadowlands. at the height of like Night Fae Druids with your Convoking and all that stuff, and wearing like different legendaries to enhance your bleed damage and that kind of stuff was really, really, really fun. I wish this played into it a bit more. The other thing too is your capstone here is during your Berserker Incarn, your Mangles and Thrashes have a 25% chance to make Maul become Ravage again. So it really incentivizes you to run Incarn and to run Incarn CDR. And as I mentioned, Incarn is on a choice node with Convoke. And so it kind of takes away that whole cat weaving damage single target CD in Convoke the Spirits, which was very, very powerful and potent back in Shadowlands. So again, another reason why I'd love to see Convoke used in the general tree, because it could make Druid of the Claw a really, really sick boss kind of talent tree. But again, as it sits right now, it's a little lacking in the AoE department in terms of weaving. Again, Ravage hits an AoE, but I like the weaving fantasy a lot. I know this is kind of like a bleed thing, and it seems like weaving is a sub focus, but I would love to see more weaving focus in AoE as opposed to just single target. Maybe that's just me though. The other thing, it kind of also has the same issue as Elune's Chosen, where again, you're trying to get a Lunar Beam for Elune's Chosen, but here you're now, because you need Incarn for Claw Rampage to get max value, and you need Ursoc's Guidance, you're again locked into this. Again, ain't no Karn builds. I don't know how viable they're going to be. We'll do some testing for sure, but you know, generally no Karn is not going to be the play, and so that kind of forces you again into these 4 Incarn talent points, which just kind of feels pretty bad to have so many points kind of locked in, especially a couple capstone points as well. So would love to see something change on that front. Overall though, I'm not super mad about these hero talents trees. The fantasies are great. The ideas and the fantasies are great. They really, you know, having the arcane, Moonkin stuff, and then having the bleed weaving stuff, super, super good ideas, and having those be the 2 hero trees in my opinion. However, outside of a couple talents in each tree, there's not a ton of interesting stuff here. There's not a ton of gameplay changing stuff here, and they both just generally leave me wanting more. I want more arcane synergies in Elune's Chosen. I want more reasons to weave in Druid of the Claw, and I would be super happy. But again, maybe that's just me. I would love to know what you guys think down in the comments below. As I mentioned, I've got a ton of War Within content coming your way over the next few weeks. And of course, all weekend, I'll be on Twitch and YouTube streaming beta dungeons and of course the raid testing as well. So make sure you stop by and say hi. Otherwise, big thank you has to go out to all of my Patreon supporters for everything that they do. And I'll see everyone in the next video.